Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and the iPhone 15 Pro Max and the S24 Ultra are both the latest flagships from both Apple and Samsung. I thought we'd compare the new designs of both phones, talk about the displays, cameras, and much more. If you want to jump to any specific point of this video, be sure to check out the chapters in the description. Now, the S24 Ultra is a little more expensive this year than the 15 Pro Max, starting at $1,199, and up to 1 terabyte will cost $1,619. Compared to the 15 Pro Max, it's $1,199 to start, but goes up to $1,599. Not too different, but slightly more expensive with the Samsung. As far as the overall build and design, well, both of them have opted for titanium this year. With the iPhone 15 Pro Max, the outside frame is titanium. The natural titanium shows the least amount of sort of smudges or fingerprints. And of course, we have glass on the front and back. This is Apple's ceramic shield or Corning ceramic shield. And we also have an eSIM only in the United States along the outside frame, which is familiar from what we've had for many years, with our volume buttons and now action button on the left-hand side, which controls different functions of the phone, to the power sleep wake button on the right-hand side. We have our millimeter wave antenna, and of course this year we've got an upgrade as well to USB-C. But the overall functionality and the overall look of it is very familiar. They have rounded the edges a little bit just to bring it over to the glass, giving it a slightly different feel, but overall it's very familiar looking. The same is true with the S24 Ultra. We've had the same design for a few years for the most part, but they've made the glass flat. We have a titanium framer on the outside edge. We've got a couple of microphones on the top, our power sleep wake button on the right along with volume, but we have a physical SIM card tray on the bottom. So on the bottom, we've got all of the regular things, and you'll see the titanium here also shows smudges as well, but we've got our USB-C and of course our S Pen as well. So basically very similar features that we have on both phones as far as the overall design and build, with glass on the back, of course our cameras, but then on the front, the S24 Ultra has Gorilla Glass armor on the front with an all-new anti-reflective coating. So if we go ahead and turn these off here, and I'll bring in a different phone since I have always on display off and no screen protector on this iPhone. But this gives you an idea of its reflectivity. So in the same exact spot, you'll see that the S24 Ultra shows almost no reflections whatsoever. You can see sort of the light above. If I move this over, it's almost blown out in the camera. So it looks much better on the S24 Ultra. They've done a great job here. Also, the Samsung Gorilla Glass armor seems to be more scratch resistant. According to Jerry Rig Everything, it scratches at a much higher level than what we had before. And using the iPhone 15 Pro Max full time, I have a ton of scratches on here just from regular use without a screen protector. Of course, a screen protector would prevent that, but I wanted to see how it would hold up. So far, I don't have a single scratch on this, but it has only been out about a week or two at this point. With the new titanium frames, they've both actually lost a little bit of weight, where the 15 Pro Max comes in at 7.81 ounces or 221 grams. The S24 Ultra is 232 grams or 8.18 ounces. So a little bit heavier with the S24, and you can definitely feel that while holding it, and it is slightly larger, so that makes sense. When it comes to the displays, well, the anti-reflective coating, of course, is new, but with the S24 Ultra, we have a 6.8-inch display, 1440 by 3120, with 505 pixels per inch. It's a 120 Hz display that can go up to 2,600 nits. With the 15 Pro Max, it's a 6.7-inch display, 2796 by 1290 at 460 pixels per inch. It goes up to 2,000 nits of brightness and has 120 Hz ProMotion. So both are very bright, but the S24 Ultra is 600 nits brighter in the brightest conditions. So that's something we haven't seen other than with the OnePlus 12 that can go even brighter than that. So that's a pretty big deal. One area that Apple improved in a couple years ago and Samsung now has improved in finally is with PWM. PWM is the way the display is controlling brightness or pulse width modulation. It's basically flashing the display faster or slower. As it gets brighter, it flashes faster, and that can cause some eye strain, cause some people to feel nauseated, and just general not feel great while looking at the display. However, the iPhone above a certain brightness, above about 39% brightness, will switch to basically what seems to be DC dimming, which doesn't really flash and shouldn't bother your eyes. However, the S24 Ultra has a higher rate at 480 Hz now, where before I couldn't really look at an S23 Ultra or S22 Ultra for a long time. It would sort of make me feel nauseated. Now I can look at it all the time and it doesn't bother my eyes at all. You can see this at 240 frames per second, where you can see they basically don't flash at all. It should be much easier on your eyes, regardless of which one you actually choose. Now, of course, one major thing on both phones, being that they're so large, they have fairly large batteries. The iPhone 15 Pro Max has a 4,441 milliamp hour battery and gets about 1 hour less of screen on time than the S24 Ultra in many tests, which this actually has a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. It gets about 7 hours of normal use. In many tests, it gets around 13 hours, and I would say with the 15 Pro Max, it gets about 6 hours in normal use, depending on how you're using it. So if we wait for this to load, you'll see this is my usage of every single day, and I had 4 hours and 16 minutes of screen active time, where on the S24 Ultra using this regularly, the only complaint I really had is when it was idle. If it was just sitting there, I let it sit for an entire day, not really using it, but having all my notifications on, and it drained it by about 50% doing nothing. So within the battery settings, if we go down, you'll see here that it says it has a day left, and it just sort of drains on its own. I've barely used it today preparing for this video, ran a couple tests, but for the most part, it's pretty good overall and should get you through a day easily. If you're a very heavy user playing a lot of games, expect about 6 hours, and I'll show you more of that later, as it will actually tell you what the remaining battery life is like while you're using an intensive app. Now, the cameras are a very big reason you may pick up one over the other. The forward-facing cameras are fairly similar. With the S24 Ultra, we have a 12 megapixel f2.2 that can record 4K 60. The 15 Pro Max has a 12 megapixel f1.9 that can record 4K 60 in ProRes. So that's maybe a little bit of an advantage there if you want the highest quality. When it comes to the rear-facing cameras, the S24 Ultra has a 200 megapixel f1.7 wide camera, a 5 times periscope telephoto zoom lens, a 10 megapixel f2.4, that's a 3 times optical zoom lens, along with a 12 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide at 120 degrees. It can record 8K 30 frames per second. The rear-facing cameras on the iPhone 15 Pro Max are a 48 megapixel f1.78 wide, 12 megapixel f2.8 5 times optical zoom, as well as a 12 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide. You can record 4K, ProRes, macro, action mode, and even a log mode with ProRes to get the highest quality video. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some photos and videos to see what you think of this overall, and see which one you think looks better and sounds better and has the better video quality as well. This is the forward-facing video from the new S24 Ultra compared to the iPhone 15 Pro Max. It gives you an idea of what it can do with dynamic range, and from what I can see, it actually looks a little bit better on the S24 Ultra. But once you blow this up to a full-size screen, let me know which one you think looks best and sounds best in the comments below, as this is the microphone from the 15 Pro Max and the microphone from the S24 Ultra. Now, when it comes to the overall speed of the devices, it varies depending on what you're doing. Both of them feel super fast. Whether you're scrolling, maybe going through different applications, scrolling through things, I would say the S24 Ultra just feels a little smoother. It could be animation speed, could just be the display or the way it's actually animated. Either way, it feels a little bit smoother that way. The S24 Ultra actually has the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, specifically made for the S24 Ultra, along with 12 gigs of RAM and storage up to 1 terabyte, but no expandable storage. With the 15 Pro Max, we have the A17 Pro processor, 8 gigs of RAM, and storage up to 1 terabyte. Again, not expandable, but you can use an external drive through USB-C to record footage if you're recording ProRes. So you do have that option if you want to do that. When it comes to the actual speed of using it, well, we have Android 14 with One UI 6.1 with a ton of new features compared to the iPhone 15 Pro Max, which we've had iOS 17 for a while now. Both are pretty familiar to most people. However, we gain a bunch of features with new AI updates with the S24 Ultra. If we go into Chrome, press and hold on the bottom bar, we can circle whatever we're looking for, and it will search that visually throughout Google and whatever you want to find. So you'll see not always are the results perfect, but you can circle to search. Again, you could search for iPhones, S24 Ultras, maybe a pair of shoes you're looking for, and much more. We also have a new feature in the phone, so if you go into that, we have the option to use Live Translate to explain calls in real time. Maybe I speak English, someone else speaks Chinese. It will translate that in real time back and forth. It's hard to say how accurate it is at this point, but it should get better over time. But you can choose from a bunch of languages and even mute the voice you're speaking in, so it only translates what your voice says. So some really nice features there. There's also a nice update where there's a note assist. So if you're using notes, I showed this before, so not just Keep Notes, but Samsung's notes you have to use specifically. And here's one that I created before where it just says a bunch of different information. And if we add to this, it has to be 200 characters or more. Today is looking a little bit nicer, and hopefully it gets a little bit better throughout the week as far as the weather is concerned. If we stop that, and then we go to this little icon here, we can have it auto format, summarize, correct spelling, or translate, and we'll have it format everything with headers and bullet points. And there we go. Current weather condition, enjoying the rain, and weather forecast. So some really nice updates with AI. There's additional updates for the camera with editing that and much more. Those are all things that you don't get on the iPhone just yet, that are probably coming in the future. But so far, software seems to be much more sort of filled with options on the S24 Ultra. And I'm a regular iPhone user, but I think the features here are really starting to outweigh what we have on the iPhone. Additionally, we have DeX on the S24 Ultra, but the iOS 17 update and also all of the other options that Apple has really works well within its ecosystem with things such as iMessage. If you're using an iPad, a Mac, everything just works together with AirDrop and much more. I've been using that for years, and it's very seamless and easy to use along with the Apple Watch. So if you're a regular Mac user, the iPhone makes a little more sense that way. If you're an S24 Ultra user or Samsung user and you have Windows and Samsung tablets, well, the ecosystem's pretty good there as well. As far as the overall speed, well, I did run a Geekbench score just to see what we'd come up with. And if we go into Geekbench on both devices here, I ran it a little bit earlier, and you'll see that the S24 Ultra is a little bit behind, but not by much. 2,285 for single core compared to 2,900 on the iPhone. Again, with the multi-core score, 6,999 compared to 7,246. This just gives you an idea of what the processor can do, but they're fairly similar in regular use. If you're to play a game, if we go into maybe real racing, let's go into that on both devices. You'll see we're loading on both devices. Give it a second here. Show you in real time how fast it loads. And we're in on both. Now, I do have to say that playing through the tutorial on both, I noticed better frame rates on the S24 Ultra. And I actually typically thought the iPhone would be a little bit better since it can play AAA games according to Apple. But if we swipe to get started here, you'll see that the frame rate was a little laggy here on the iPhone. You can actually see that where it's super smooth on the S24 Ultra. We also have the option, if we go into notifications, to open something called Game Booster. If we go into that, it will tell us battery remaining, how much time we have left, temperature of the device, as well as memory, and then we can turn it on to a priority mode that sort of silences everything else. So if we want to do that, we can do that. Then we'll go into the game itself, tap enter, tap race, and give it just a moment to load, and then we're in. You'll see the S24 Ultra was a little bit faster there. And there we are. So I'll say that honestly, using both of these I think is a good experience, but the S24 Ultra seemed to be a little bit less warm when using it as they focused more on handling the temperature of it. The iPhone seemed to drop some frames as well. So here's with the iPhone. You'll see it looks pretty good, but it's not perfect. And on the S24 Ultra, again, it just seems a little bit smoother. Maybe it's running at a higher frame rate and also that 120 hertz display with the game prioritizer. And typically, like I said, I'm actually an iPhone user, but I've been very impressed with the S24 Ultra. So just doing things on it, they feel equally fast. I really have no complaints with either, but playing games, I would say the S24 Ultra is probably a little bit better as it's prioritizing heating and cooling and taking care of that. Now, one other thing worth noting is they're both IP resistant, IP68, dust and water resistant for both. The iPhone is 6 meters for 30 minutes, where the S24 Ultra is 1.5 meters for 30 minutes. If you drop it in the water, neither of them cover it under warranty, so just be careful either way. If you wanted to use it underwater, I would put a waterproof case on it, as neither actually handle that with warranty, and you'll have to pay typically a deductible if it does get water inside of it. So just keep that in mind. As far as which one you should choose, well, again, this comes down to what ecosystem you use. If you're a Mac user, if you have an iPad or an Apple Watch, I would recommend the iPhone. If you want to sort of multitask like crazy, you want to use maybe Dex, you want to game regularly, and that's what you care about most, along with Windows and maybe a Samsung tablet or maybe an Android tablet with Pixel, then you may want to consider the S24 Ultra. Both are equally priced, both are equally fast, both have great cameras, and both of them function differently. If you want to record video full-time, I would go with the iPhone 15 Pro Max, as the video camera in my experience seems to be a little bit better as far as overall noise and just quality in general. But if you take photos, you want to zoom a lot, the S24 Ultra might be the right choice. It really comes down to what you prioritize most. So I'd love to hear from you in the comments below which one you choose and why, and let me know which one you're using currently and if you plan to pick up either one of these. Of course, I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.